the first time in history, the technological infrastructure is in place for a world dictator to fulfill this kind of a cashless, big brother society. Cash is disappearing. Plastic cards with magnetic strips or computer chips are replacing notes and coins.
Not everyone is taken in by the Antichrist, however, and he is unable to completely enforce his worldwide rule. Daniel foretells that some nations will rebel against him, particularly Christian, Jewish, and Muslim nations, most of whom zealously reject idol worship. The Antichrist retaliates, initiating one of the worst mass persecution of peoples in history, and about which Jesus states,
"Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened."
This worldwide manhunt, reminiscent of but surpassing the Roman persecution of the early Christians, lasts for 3.5 years and is known as the Great Tribulation.
"And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other."
3.5 years after the Antichrist sets up his image, Jesus returns in the clouds where every eye shall see him.
He gathers his followers who have remained faithful through the Antichrist's great persecution and literally takes them off the earth, meeting them in the air. His faithful out of the way, judgment begins on the Antichrist and his followers.
"And I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, 'Go your ways, and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth.' And the first went, and poured out his vial upon the earth. And there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which had power over these plagues. And they repented not to give him glory. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon.
This is the Valley of Megiddo, also known as the Esdraelon Valley. Armageddon in Hebrew means the height of Megiddo, which is this dome-shaped hill that I'm standing upon. When Napoleon stood here and looked out across this great valley, he said, "What a place for a battle." When General Pershing saw it, he said, "What a place to fight a tactical war." It is around this historic mount that Bible prophecy indicates a colossal battle between good and evil will be fought.
In heaven, the armies of the Lord prepare for battle. On earth, the Antichrist and his forces are engaged in a conflict of their own as they combat disloyal rebel forces.
It is while the Antichrist is engaged in battle that Jesus and his resurrected saints come to the fore with a literal invasion from heaven. The Antichrist turns his weapons against the celestial forces, and a battle like no other on earth ensues. The Battle of Armageddon. During Armageddon, the prayers of those who have long cried out for justice are answered, as God's patience with man's evil ways reaches its limit.
The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand, and I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible.
Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces.
Jesus is often referred to as the cornerstone, the beginning of a new and spiritual temple foundation. Just as the stone was cut without hands and came hurling to destroy the image in Daniel chapter 2, so Jesus, the Son of God, comes from heaven to lay a final blow to the Antichrist's kingdom.
The prophet Daniel says that the Battle of Armageddon will rage for 45 days. The Antichrist is cast into a lake of fire, and his evil followers slain. The carnage is so great that the prophet Ezekiel says that in Israel alone it will take 7 months just to bury the dead, and 7 years to clean up the twisted metal of wrecked armaments. The battle won, Jesus steps once more upon the earth, right over there on the Mount of Olives.
And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth.
Seismologists tell us that the Mount of Olives lies on an earthquake fault, and that a 6-inch wide crack runs across the top of the hill from north to south.
When we look at Mount of Olives, which is right not far away from where we're sitting right now, we can see that the literal fulfillment of this verse can very easily happen. One thing we do know is that Christ will come physically. His appearance is very important because it says the eyes of men will behold him. There's also going to be a supernatural manifestations all over. The whole earth at 1 minute will see him. And so there would be some kind of a supernatural phenomena from the heavenlies that will attract the entire attention of the earth. It has to be. And then those who will live around here, specifically this verse is for them, they probably will see some manifestations on the Mount of Olives and Christ that are different than if I look today at Mount of Olives and see the mountain sitting there in its tranquility and, peaceful fashion. I'm sure it will be different then. There will be a lot of commotion. There will be a lot of supernatural manifestations that God will reveal himself through Christ, and Christ himself will come and will land, I believe, right on the Mount of Olives. And then, of course, we have there a large graveyard right now of many people, even David's tomb and others that believe that because Christ or the Messiah, the Jewish people, even non-Christians, believe the same way, that when Christ or the Messiah will come, those will be the first to be resurrected because they are buried in Mount of Olives or close to the Mount of Olives. And so again, there will be a lot of the resurrection part. There will be the commotion of his arrival. There may be the split of the mountain. All the functions of the heavenlies, sun, moons, and stars will take different shape. And so we are expecting real dramatic moments around here.